Hi, Kevin at Ledoux Guitars. Today I've got another installment on the Major Surgery series, replacing a top on this jumbo guitar. The last video I showed that I patched in some of these linings and things like that that needed to be done. And today I'm going to redome this rim so that the top will properly fit. Now I did a video on doming a top or a back and fitting before, so it's a little overlap, maybe some redundancy, but maybe you can pick up a tip or two out of this. The first thing I did was, once I got my patches in here, the lining pieces, I just quickly touched those up with a hand plane to bring them down level with the surface that was there. And now I'm going around this with a piece of nice yellow chalk. You could use any white or whatever, I suppose. Chalk is easy for me. I used to be a public school teacher. I got a lot of chalk. So now that I have that, that's going to allow me to see exactly what my sanding disc is doing at any given moment. And we're going for a 40-foot radius. That was what was original to the guitar. So we're just going to set this on here, and I'm going to rotate this by hand. I've had comments before about making up some sort of spindle and rotating this perfectly and all of this stuff. If you want to do big production, I guess. So I'm rotating here. And I have the outside mold. You can't see it real well, but I've got the outside mold clamped down to the bench so that there's no wiggling. You stabilize your work. But what you can see with this, and I'm going to change positions with the camera so that you can see exactly the results that I'm getting. So you can see in here where the dish has taken the chalk right off the rim. In other words, that's where we're hitting. And you can see by the remaining chalk that that's where we're not down to the surface. And that tells me an awful lot. Now, I could just keep grinding away, I suppose, with that, with the radius dish, but I can go a little bit faster. So I'm going to reposition you again and just show you the procedure that I use. So I'm sanding a little more. And I remove that, and I can see once again where the chalk remains and the dish has hit. And I'm looking at the quality of the surface, and that's looking good. So now I can pick up speed, or I can control just a little bit how that dome sits on there by doing a little bit of judicious hand planing. I've got to go down further here a little bit because I've still got chalk at this end of the tail block, or excuse me, the heel block. But I don't want to change the depth too much because my neck already fit when I had an original top. So I don't want to make that area more difficult to refit. So I'm going to pitch us back this way by just planing off a little bit at a time. And I don't want to be drastic with this. You're not talking about 10 or 12 swipes with a hand plane. You're talking about 1 or 2 and see what you get. Slow is always better when the results need to be really precise. So try it again. And that was just a short duration of sanding, but that gives you the idea of the process that I'm going to go through. I'm just going to repeat that process until I get this down. I'll do that off camera, and then I'll be back with my next step. Well, I finished the doming, and so now I've positioned the top on the guitar rims, and I do this all in the mold. It's never taken out of the mold because I don't want any springing or anything when I go to glue the top back down. And I want to point out that I have put a couple of cam clamps on the top to hold it in position. Very, very light pressure. But trying to hold it with my hand, I've found that to be unsuccessful in the past quite often. And I want to point out that it's important here. You can see right here where my finger is pointing that I have made sure that the body line and the center line of the top coincide perfectly. And I've done so at the other end. So now I'm going to move on to my next step, which will be tracing the positions of each one of the braces. So it's a little difficult to see here, but I'll point these out. just as an example, here's my upper X brace, my upper cross strut, and I want to find the position of those on the rim, and I also want to mark them on the top. So I take a really short pencil that I've used up a whole bunch of, and excuse my hand, but I get under there and I trace the ends of those braces, and then I take my pencil and right on the rim, I'm going to mark that position. And once again, I'm not afraid of digging into the finish because it's all going to be gone sooner or later anyway. So I'm just going to mark those positions. And I'm going to go all the way around the guitar body and do that. My next step was to transfer those marks that I made on the side of the rim here to the lining. And I've just made these marks. I hope you can see them adequately. Each one of those tells me where those various braces lie. And now I'm going to make some marks across the guitar to kind of show me a little better exactly where those are positioned. And that's really simple. I'm sure many of you employ this technique in new guitar making. So with a straight edge, I'm just going to trace. There's the upper edge of my upper cross strut. And of course, the lower edge of it. And I want this to be neat. The tighter the better, but I don't try to get too retentive about it because it can just be a frustration when it comes to actually installing it. And sometimes the linings don't like to cooperate with you exactly either. So I'm going to trace now the angles here for the X brace, like so. And then I'm going to begin to route these out with a Dremel tool. As I mentioned, I'm going to cut the mortises into the rims over here with my Dremel tool, but now it's a question of how deep do I need to cut for each brace. And my solution to that problem is just one of these, I don't know, what do you call this? A coping tool of some kind. I don't know. There's a name for it, but I forget what it is. And by just pressing that over the brace where it's going to sit on the rim, now I've got a depression. And of course, I'm going to match that to the depth with my Dremel tool here. I'm just going to match those two up. And if anything, I'm going to go a little bit light because I can pare down the bottom of the mortise if I need to. And I like that method because I like to get the braces tucked in as tightly as I can. I think the real reason for doing that is I've heard all of these nonsense rumors about, vibration going all the way out there, horse hockey. I think the reason, and historically I learned this from the guys at Martin Guitar back when I was a kid, by tucking the braces into those rims out there and making sure the lining is over that, trapping it, if that brace comes loose, at least it won't be flopping in that region where it's harder and harder to reach. So maybe that's an advantage to you. I mentioned earlier that sometimes the linings don't cooperate when you're doing this, and I thought I'd point out what I mean. You can see right here at the edge of that black mark, that's the end of that patched in lining. Now that stayed there because there's glue in that joint. But if that had been right at the split in the lining, that probably wouldn't stay there and it would break off. So yeah, you do lose some precision sometimes. And you'll see things like that happen here, where you've got just a little bit of a corner sticking out. Sometimes you just can't make it work neatly, and you're better off to just clean it off and let it be what it is. It still works. Here's a perfect example here. That little corner right there is probably not going to stay there. It won't even survive the pressure of the spinning router bit, more than likely. So it just goes, and it's all okay. Okay, Mr. Pragmatic Luthier, I don't have a Dremel tool. What am I going to do? Well, you could, if you have a trim router, I suppose you could try this. I don't like the idea because they're heavy and the visibility through them is pretty limited. So you could try it, you might make it work, but I don't care to go there. But there is a way you can do this, and you can do it for every brace, and it's not really too difficult. Um, you'll need a craft saw, and just a sidebar here, this is a conventional craft saw of the X-Acto brand or whatever similar you may have. They come with blades in this length and in varying widths, of course. For very small work and in certain cases, a short blade is nice, but they don't make them. No problem. I cut one off and I redimpled the back right here the same way they do when they manufacture them to hold that blade in there. And just screw that in. And that short little saw is really handy. So all I'm going to do is make cuts there at the edges of those to start those mortises in. And this one even falls, I don't know if you can see this, sorry. This first cut falls right between two pieces of lining. The web is wide open, so it's a no-brainer. But this one, I'm just going to cut that in a little. And then to establish a depth, just a common 4-inch square like this, or a 6-inch if you've got one. And you gauge this by setting it down on your brace, of course. And I'm just going to trace that lightly. This is not going to be super accurate, but that's okay. You're working with hand tools now, and you'll be able to judge that quite effectively, I think. I hope I've got you in the right position to see something. But what I'm going to do now is just reach in there with a hand chisel. You notice I'm hooking my finger over the back of that, but I don't want it to be above it because that's a really good way to get yourself chopped up. And I'm just going to edge that stuff off there. Just nibble it off a little bit at a time. And you may benefit from a shorter chisel. This is what I happened to grab. I probably should have grabbed a shorter one. I have them. And I'm going to work my way down to the line. And you see that comes out quite readily. Don't put too much pressure on it. You can break your rim if you're not careful. You don't want to do that. And I'm just trimming here on the back a little bit, slicing some of that down. And there it is. It's that simple. This is a technique that when I first learned to build guitars, this was the technique that they showed in Cumpiano and Nadelson's book. It's obviously very low tech, and it works like crazy. You can do it. And when you go to set your bracing in, you know, if the brace doesn't drop down far enough, depending on how far you've got to go, you can either shave off the bottom of that mortise or you can shave just a tiny bit off the top of your brace if you have to. Just that easy. With the mortising done, now I'm turning my attention back to the top. On each one of these braces where I've made a mark showing where the brace sits on the rim, now I'm going to cut that back. So I'm going to take that mark into account, and I'm going to come back away from that mark about the thickness of the rim itself and cut a parallel cut. And for this application, this little short saw blade becomes very useful. So I'm going to go around and cut each one of those braces back. And then I'll carefully, with a chisel, I'll take that excess off. My short blade is handy because it helps me to keep from cutting into that top at all. It just gives me a little bit more control that I'm more comfortable with. With those cuts made, I'm going to clean off this excess. I'm working, by the way, on the radius dish that the top was made in. Just makes a nice platform to keep it on. I've got it padded, of course. And you can reach in, if you've got a long enough chisel, you can reach in and clear that excess off that way. Or I happen to have some crank neck chisels that I really like to use for this. And so I'm just paring each one of those away. And I'm not going to get real aggressive here because I don't want to cut down into that top a whole bunch. Just gently pare that off there. And one at a time, and layer by layer. Don't try to dig too deep because you run the risk, I suppose, of maybe splitting the brace if you're not careful. although it should stop at the saw cut, but still, caution is a good idea. And as I get down, if I have not cut far enough down with my saw, I can go and touch that up. Or there's no reason why you can't use your chisel to just score that a little bit and continue to take that down. Now, if you're not real experienced at this point, or you're not well practiced, I should say, with chisel techniques, you get that down as close as you can. And each one of these things, of course, you could look at it two ways. You've got to do this correctly, and you could, increase your pucker factor, I suppose. But this is an opportunity to hone your skills. But still, if you want to go a little further or you're uncertain, another technique you could use is when you get down there, take a good scraper blade and just gently scrape that back. Don't get too aggressive, but all I'm trying to do is just get down through the old glue residue from where that, excuse me, where that brace was glued down in the first place. And haven't quite got it there. But there we go. Good enough. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around and finish all that up. So now I've put the top down on the rims. And what I'm doing now is I'm checking where each one of these braces fits in. I'm checking for a proper fit. If the braces are too thick or the mortises are too shallow, that'll rock on there a little bit. So I'm just checking to make sure that all of these regions are acceptable. And if they are, then I'm going to go underneath here again, and I'm going to trace around here to take off all of this excess top and get it back closer so that when I glue it down, I don't have the propensity to break that off and break a chip out of there where I don't want it. I've been over to the bandsaw and cut the excess off the top. I've made sure everything is clean inside, just double checking everything. Same with the inside of the box, vacuumed it out, blew it out with compressed air, and I'm ready to assemble. I have glue on my rims, and I have wiped away all of the excess, or at least I thought I did. And so now we're just going to put this top on here, get it settled down where it belongs, making sure we're matched up with our center lines just fine. And so now we glue it down. But how? Well, you've seen this before in a video, I'm pretty sure, but we're going to glue it down with the old rubber band technique. And this can be a pain in the rear end with this particular outside mold, because you got to reach under there and catch all of those bolts to get a grip on it. But this is the basic idea. And it's surprising how much pressure you really don't need on this, but I think there's a tendency to overdo it sometimes on my part. You really don't need that much pressure. So I put a long reach clamp in here just to make sure that the top is down tight on that tail block. Other than that, you can see it's bound up here. I've just got it clamped with a spring clamp to hold the band tight. And there it is. It's just all kind of mummified, so to speak. And tomorrow morning, I'll take it out of here and we should have a completed guitar body. Then it'll be down to, cleaning up, trimming it out again, rebinding it and so on. Then a total refinish, neck reset, assembly, and the whole schmear. Okay, hope you got something good out of this. Kevin Ledoux, the Pragmatic Luthier. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you will.